everyone, Rhubarb and Rue here, and today we're going to be discussing Aarne-Thompson-Uther folktale number 500 and 501. If you're not familiar with the ATU index, it is a list of Indo-European folktales by type, and 500, most of my audience will mostly be familiar with it as Rumpelstiltskin, though its name in the index is the name of the supernatural helper. And number 501, as you can tell by the numbers being right next to each other, is a very closely related tale called, in the index, The Three Spinning Women Helpers. So today, as we go through these tales, I would like you to think, what lessons do these stories teach? Because these stories are not just entertainment, they were also meant to teach certain lessons to children and reinforce them for adults. So here we have two tales that start off very, very similarly, but then go in completely different directions. So as you listen to them, think, what lesson is being told here? To give you an example of what I mean, by the way, this is mango black tea from Adagio Teas. It is a very nice brew, and I do recommend it. So to give you an example of what I mean, we have the story of Little Red Riding Hood, which I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with. You know, the little girl in her red hood is given a basket of cookies and told to go visit her grandmother and bring them to the grandmother, and told to not to leave the path, not to leave the route that she knows. And while she's there, she is approached by a wolf who talks to her and says, "Oh, can I have some of those cookies?" And she says, "No, they're for my grandma." And he says, "Oh, where are you going?" And she tells him where she's going. And he says, "Oh, I can help you get there. I know a shortcut." Now, obviously, wolves don't talk, and wolves are not particularly well known for being fans of baked goods. So what is actually going on in this story? This story is a warning to children about predators, obviously. The wolf, you see, as opposed to the fox or the chicken or the goose. The wolf represents predation, a threat, danger. So metaphorically, what's happening here is a child is somewhere out alone. An adult who means them no good approaches them and asks them where they're going, what's in their basket, what are they doing, and offers to help them when the child obviously is doing all right on their own, and the little girl stays on the path and doesn't follow the wolf. So this is supposed to be a lesson to children about stranger danger. By contrast, in many stories, a young man or a prince or something like that is out in the woods, and he encounters an animal in distress, and he helps it. And the animal says, "If you help me, I will give you aid when you need help." And so he does. So in both instances, we have a child encountering an animal in the forest, but with very different meanings. Little Red encountering the wolf is a child in danger. The prince encountering a trapped fox is an example of help people who need help, and you might get help too. In all these cases, the fox isn't really a fox. The fox is a vulnerable person. The wolf isn't really a wolf. The wolf is a dangerous person. Fairy tales are often very metaphorical in this way. So keep that in mind, and we're going to look at two stories. One is the English version of ATU 500 called Tit Tot, and the other one is the German version of number 501, The Three Spinners. So here we will see stories that begin the same way but end very differently, and so have very different lessons. So here we go. Tit Tot. Yes, hi, cat. Oh, maybe let's not drink my tea, shall we? Tea is not good for kitties. I know, you want the tea. Oh, I know. He always wants whatever I have. That is a very cat thing. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a woman, and she baked 5 pies. And when they came out of the oven, they were overbaked. The crusts were too hard to eat. So she says to her daughter, "Daughter, You put them their pies on the shelf, leave them there a little, and they'll come again. She meant, the crust would get soft. But the girl, she says to herself, well, if they'll come again, I'll eat them now. And so she set to work, and she ate all 5 pies, from the first to the last. Well, comes supper time, the woman says, go and get one of them their pies. I dare say they've come again by now. So the girl went, and she looked, and there was nothing there but the empty pie dishes. So she comes back, and she says, no, they ain't come again. Not one of them, says her mother. Nope, not one of them, says she. Well, come again or not come again, said the woman. I'll have one for supper. But you can't if they ain't come, says the girl. But I can, says the mother. Go and bring the best of them. Best or worst, says the girl. I've eaten them all, so you can't have one till that's come again. Well, the woman, she was fed up. So she took her spinning wheel to the door and sat to spin. And as she span, she sang, my daughter hath eaten 5 pies today. My daughter hath eaten 5 pies today. So the king was coming down the street, and he heard her sing. But what she sang he couldn't quite hear, so he stopped, and he said, what was that you were singing, my good one? Now, the woman was ashamed to let him know that her daughter had eaten 5 pies all in one go. So she sang instead of that, my daughter hath spun 5 skeins today. My daughter hath spun 5 skeins today. And if you don't know what a skein is, it's a twisted up yarn. So usually we would call things like a ball of yarn. That's a skein. And just so you know, if you don't spin a lot, that is a lot of yarn to spin in one day. So the king was very impressed that this woman's daughter could spin 5 skeins of yarn in one day. Stars of mine, said the king. I've never heard tell of anyone that could do that. So he says, look you here, I want a wife, and I'll marry your daughter. But, says he, 11 months out of the year, she shall have all that she likes to eat, all the gowns she likes to wear, and all the company she likes to keep. But the last month of the year, she'll have to spin 5 skeins every day, and if she doesn't, I shall kill her. Well, says the woman as she thinks, then says, all right, for she thought, what a grand marriage that was, to a king. And as for the 5 skeins, when the time came, there'd be plenty of ways of getting out of that, she figured. And maybe she thinks, he'll have forgotten about it by then. So the king and the girl were married. And for 11 months, the girl had all the food she liked to eat, all the gowns she liked to wear, and all the company she liked to keep. But when the time was getting on, she began to think about the skeins and wonder if the king had remembered. But he didn't say one word about them, and so she thought he must have forgotten them. So, the last day of the last month, he takes her to a room that she's never set eyes on before. There is nothing in it but a spinning wheel and a stool and heaps of combed wool. And says he, now, my love, you will be shut in here tomorrow with some food and all this wool, and if you haven't spun 5 skeins by the night, your head will come off. And so away he went about his business. Well, the girl was that frightened that she'd always been a bit of a lazy girl, and she didn't really know how to spin very well. So what was she going to do tomorrow with no one to come and show her how to spin or to spin all of the wool up for her? So she sat down on a stool in the kitchen and she cried and cried. So as she was crying, all of a sudden she heard a sort of knocking low down on the door out to the garden. So she opened it up, and what should she see but this little small black creature with a long curly tail and little black wings. He looked up at her, right curious, and it said, what are you crying for? And she says, what's that to you? And he says, never you mind, but tell me what you're crying for. You won't do me any good if I do, says she. Well, you don't know that, says the little thing, and twirled its tail around. Well, she says, if it won't do any harm, well, it don't do no good. So she told him about the pies, the skeins, the king, and everything. So happens I'm pretty good at spinning, says the little thing. And this is what I'll do. I'll come to your window every morning, take the wool, and bring it back all spun at night. What's your pay for this? Says she. It looked at her out of the corner of its eyes and said, I'll give you 3 guesses every night for my name, and if you haven't guessed it before the month's up, then you shall be mine. Well, she thought, she's sure to guess the thing's name before the month's up. I think both the girl and her mother are a little bit overconfident. But anyway, all right, says she, I agree. All right, says the creature, and ooh, it twirled its tail. Well, the next day, her husband took her into the room, brought her some food, locked her in, and there was the wool and the spinning wheel. So there's the wool, she thinks, and if it isn't spun up tonight, off goes my head. Well, the king had hardly left her behind when there was a knocking on the window. So she got up, she opened it, and there was the little black thing. Where's the flax? Said the little creature. Here it is. Sorry, where's the wool? Said the little creature. And here it is, she says. And she gave him all the wool. Well, he flew off. And in the evening there was a knocking on the window again. So she got up, she opened it, and there was a little weird thing with its 5 skeins of yarn in his arm. Here it is, he says, and he gave it to her. Now, what's my name? It says. Is it Bill? She says. No, it ain't, said it, and it twirled its tail all fast. Is it Ned? She asks. No, it isn't, it says, and it twirled its tail even faster. Well, is it Mark? She asks, and he says, no, it isn't, twirled his tail harder, and away he flew. By the way, I know that I'm switching between it and he for the creature's pronouns, but that's what it does in the story. So, anyway. So, when her husband comes back, he unlocks the door, he opens it, and there's 5 skeins of wool. I see I shan't have to kill you tonight, my dear, he says. So we'll come and have dinner with me, and tomorrow you'll be in here with your food and your wool again. Well, every day for that whole month, he locks her in the room with some food and some wool and that spinning wheel. And every morning the little black thing comes, takes the wool, and then brings it back in the evening, all spun up. And she guesses its name 3 times, and each day she doesn't guess it. And as it got towards the end of the month, the little creature began to look really maliceful and more excited each time, and its tail twirled faster and faster. So then it comes to the day before the last one. So the creature comes at night with its 5 skeins, and it said, haven't you figured out my name yet? Is it Nicodemus? Says she. No, it ain't, he says, and spins his tail fast. Is it Samuel? She says. No, it isn't, he says, and he spins his tail even faster. Is it Methuselah? She asks. No, it ain't that either, it says. And then it looks at her with eyes like coals of fire and says, woman, there's only tomorrow night, and then you'll be mine. And it flies away. Well, she felt horrible. However, she heard the king coming down the passageway. He unlocked the door, and in he came. And when he sees the 5 skeins of yarn, he says, well, my dear, I don't see but that you'll have your skeins ready tomorrow night as well, and I reckon I won't have to kill you. I'll have supper in here with you tonight. So he had the supper brought, and then he sat down to eat with her. Well, he hadn't eaten but a mouthful when he stops and begins to laugh. What is it? She asks. Why, he says, I was hunting today, and I got away to a place in the woods that I'd never seen before. And you'll remember from our previous video on the kind and the unkind girls that the woods are where the magic things hide, away from civilization, away from towns and castles. That's where the strange things and the magic happens. Anyway, so I was hunting in the wood, and I came to a place that I'd never seen before. And there was an old chalk pit there, though I never remember there being a chalk mine here at any time. But I heard a kind of sort of humming, and so I got off my horse and I went right quiet up to the edge of the pit, and I looked down. Well, there, down in the pit, was the funniest little black creature that you ever set eyes on, with a long curly tail and little black wings. And what was it doing? But it had this little tiny spinning wheel, and it was spinning away wonderful fast. So fast that the thread was just fountaining out of its little hands. And as it spun, it sang, "Nimmy, nimmy, not, my name's Tom Tit Tot." Or actually, if it's treadling a wheel, it's more like, "Nimmy, nimmy, not, my name's Tom Tit Tot." Anyway, well, when the girl heard this, she said, "Oh, that is very strange." And she kept her face very straight, but she felt as if she could have jumped out of her skin for joy. But she didn't say a word about that. So the next day the little thing came, and it looked so maliceful and so excited when it got the wool. And when night came, she heard that knocking against the window pane. She opened it up, and the little thing didn't just sit on the ledge to give her the skeins, it hopped right into the room. It was grinning from ear to ear, and oh, its tail was twirling so fast. "What's my name?" it says as it gives her the skeins. Is that Solomon?" she asks, pretending to be afraid. "No, it ain't," it says, and it comes further into the room. "Well, is it Zebedee?" she asks. "No, it ain't," it says, and it laughed and it twirled its tail so fast you couldn't hardly see it. "Take your time, woman," it says. "Next guess and you're mine." Well, it stretched out its black hands to her. So she backed up a step or two, took a deep breath, stood up straight, settled her shoulders, looked at it, and then laughed and said, "Nimmy, nimmy, not. Your name's Tom Tit Tot." Well, it heard her, and it gave an awful shriek and flew away into the dark, and she never saw it ever again. So, what did you think? Do you like this version better than Rumpelstiltskin, or just as good? I personally think spinning a lot of yarn in one day is just slightly more real, personally, than spinning straw into gold. Because one is an act of great magic, and the other is just near impossibility for a human spinner. So, what do you think the lesson is that we're teaching here? Perhaps don't eat 5 pies at one time. I think that should be good advice for anybody, honestly. And don't lie to people about embarrassing things. A little white lie might be fine now and then, but maybe don't lie about big things. It could get you in trouble. I mean, look how much trouble the girl, and I guess her mother, got in just for her lying about first eating the pies and then saying that her daughter had spun 5 skeins of yarn in one day. So, I have to turn on the light here. It's gotten a bit dark. Okay, much better. So, that was Tom Tit Tot. Next up, we're going to have, from the Brothers Grimm, The 3 Spinners. And you'll notice this one begins pretty much very similar, but goes in a completely different direction and teaches a different lesson. First, some tea, of course. Much better. All right. So, The 3 Spinners. There was once a girl who was lazy and would not spin, and her mother would say what she would, but she could not bring her to do it. Now, I should note that before the Industrial Revolution, and when industrial spinning, things like the spinning wheel, spindles, the spinning jenny, which plies the threads into yarn, and especially looms, like not electric, but mechanical looms and all that. Every single bit of fiber, every shirt, every scarf, every sock, every bit of rope, every sail on every ship, they were all made by hand spinning. There's a reason why the Industrial Revolution first settled on textiles as the thing to mechanize. Because a huge amount of human labor, mostly women's labor, was done just turning various fibers like wool and silk and flax into wool, silk, and linen. So, a girl who will not spin, this isn't just like, oh, she doesn't want to wash the dishes. This is a big deal, kind of. Women were often, they had to spin all the time. It was what a lot of the income for a household was for. And textiles are always needed. So, here we go. The three spinners. There was once a girl who was lazy and would not spin. Okay, so at last, the mother was so overcome with anger and impatience that she beat her, on which the girl began to weep loudly. Now, at this very moment, the queen was driving by. Not a king, but a queen. And when she heard the weeping, she stopped her carriage, went into the house, and asked the mother why she was beating her daughter so that the cries could be heard out on the road. Well, the woman was ashamed to reveal the laziness of her daughter, and she said, I cannot get her to leave off spinning. She insists on spinning forever and ever, and I am poor and I cannot buy enough flax. So the queen said, there is nothing I like better to hear than spinning, and I am never happier than when the wheels are humming. So let me have your daughter with me in the palace. I have flax enough, and she shall spin as much as she likes. Well, the mother was heartily satisfied with this, and the queen took the girl with her. When they had arrived at the palace, she led her up into 3 rooms which were filled from the bottom to the top with the finest flax. Now spin me this flax, said she, and when thou hast done it, thou shalt have my eldest son for a husband, even if thou art poor. I care not for that. Your indefatigable industry, in other words, your industry, where your work where you never get tired of working, that is dowry enough. And if you don't know what a dowry is, it used to be that when people got married, the woman brought with her to the marriage, the bride, a dowry, usually of valuable items needed for a household, but sometimes just plain old money. And this went to the groom's family, not necessarily to the new couple. So, the girl, she was secretly terrified, for she could not have spun the flax. No, not if she had lived till she was 300 years old, and had sat at it every day from morning till night. When, therefore, she was alone, she began to weep, and sat thus for 3 days without moving a finger. On the 3rd day, the queen came in, and when she saw that nothing had been spun yet, and the girl's eyes were all red, she was surprised. But the girl excused herself by saying that she had not been able to begin because of her great distress at leaving her mother's house. The queen was satisfied with this, but said when she left, tomorrow you must begin to work. So the girl was alone again, and she did not know what to do, and in her distress she went to the window. Then she saw 3 women coming towards her, the first of whom had a broad, flat foot. The second had this great big underlip that hung down over her chin, like, and the third had a broad, broad thumb. They remained standing before the window, looking up at her, and asked the girl, what's wrong? She complained of her troubles, and then they offered her their help, and said, if thou wilt invite us to the wedding, not be ashamed of us, and will call us thine aunts, and likewise will place us up at thy table at the wedding, we will spin up all the flax for thee, and that in a very short time. With all my heart, she replied, do but come in and begin the work at once. So she let in the three strange women and cleared a place in the first room where they seated themselves and began their spinning. One drew the thread out and trod the wheel. That was she with the broad foot. The other wetted the thread by running it against her lip. That was she with the big lower lip. And the third struck the table with her thumb. And that was the one with the broad thumb. That is twisting the thread and striking it against the table. And whenever she struck the table, a skein of thread fell to the ground that was spun in the finest manner possible. If you don't know, by the way, spinning a fine, strong thread that's very thin is harder than spinning a thick one. So, the girl concealed the three spinners from the queen whenever she came to check on her, and showed her, whenever she came, the great quantity of spun thread, until the latter could not praise her enough. When the first room was empty, and she had moved on to the second, and at last the third, and then that too was quickly cleared. Then the three women took their leave and said to the girl, "Do not forget what thou hast promised us. It will make thy fortune." And if some of you are saying, fortune, spinning, this sounds a lot like the three fates. I think there's an argument to be made there that this might be them showing up in a modern, well, comparatively modern form. Anyway, so the girl showed the queen the empty rooms and the great pile of thread. So the queen was very happy, and she gave orders for the wedding, and the bridegroom rejoiced that he was to have such a clever and industrious wife, and praised her mightily. "I have 3 aunts," said the girl, "and they have been very kind to me, and I should not like to forget them in my good fortune. So please allow me to invite them to the wedding, and let them sit with us at the table." The queen and the bridegroom said, "Why should we not allow that?" And so it was done. Therefore, when the feast began, the 3 women entered, all in strange apparel, with their broad foot, and broad big lower lip, and broad flat thumb. "Welcome, dear aunts," says the girl. "Ah," said the bridegroom, "how comest thou by these odious friends?" Which basically means, "Girl, where did you get these ugly friends from? Ooh." And thereupon he went to the one with the broad flat foot and said, "How did you come by such a broad foot?" And "By treading," she answered, "by treading." So if you don't know how a spinning wheel works, that's my rice cooker, by the way, making that noise. So you have your foot on the treadle, and you do this with your foot to make the spinning wheel spin. You have to do it in a constant rhythm. So the bridegroom went to the second and said, "How did you come by your falling broad lip?" "By licking," she answered, "by licking." Then he asked the third, "How did you come by your broad thumb?" "By twisting the thread," she answered, "by twisting the thread." On this the king's son was alarmed and said, "Neither now nor ever shall my beautiful bride again touch a spinning wheel." And thus the girl never had to spin again, and had married a prince. So what did you think of that? What do you think the lesson is in this story? I think once again, it's saying, don't lie about things, especially to strangers like that, because the girl would never have gotten in trouble in the first place. First, if she had done her spinning, so you should do your chores. And second, if her mother hadn't felt she had to lie to the queen about why she was so upset. So don't lie to people and do your chores, obviously. Now when Rumpelstiltskin and Tom Tit Tot, the girl gets help from a supernatural helper that means her ill and wants to take either her or her child. And she has to come up with a way to find the thing's name, and without realizing it, her husband comes to her aid. So this might also say, be careful of making bargains with strange creatures. Also good advice. But the 3 spinners goes differently. instead of asking her for her baby or herself, these old women whose bodies have become kind of ugly through their work, they just want to be invited to the party. They just want to have a place of honor at the table. And, they just want to be included. They don't want to be ostracized or cast aside because of their looks. And the girl keeps her word. When she's the bride, they come to her wedding and they sit at the table. If she had not kept her word, then first of all, they probably would have figured out sooner rather than later she can't spin. And second of all, these are kind of supernatural beings in a way. You don't want to break your word to them. That would be a bad idea. So she keeps her word, and in return, not only gets a good husband, but doesn't have to do her least favorite chore ever again. So I think that both of these stories have some good things to say about honesty, about doing your chores, and about keeping your word. What do you think the lessons might be beyond that? Which version do you like better? Do you like ATU 500, where the girl has to get help from a supernatural helper that wants to take something precious from her, and it's only by subterfuge that she manages to not have it taken? Or do you like the Three Spinners, where the girl gets help from possibly supernatural beings, but definitely old, ugly women that work very hard and just want to be included at the party? I think I like the second better, personally. And I think that's also a very good lesson. Even if you think someone doesn't look very nice and is like poor or ugly or whatever, that doesn't mean you should exclude them. And by keeping her word and giving them a place at the table, she got good fortune. By the way, if you don't know about the Three Fates thing, in a lot of Indo-European mythologies, but most well known in the ancient Greek myths, the Three Fates, who, steered the course of fortune, were depicted as spinners, that they spun out the lifeline as a thread, like someone's life is a thread that they spun out and would get woven into a tapestry. But one spun the thread, one measured it, and the third one cut it at the right point when that person should end their life. Or rather, when their life should end, I should say. So women and spinning are associated very strongly, and three women who are spinners has a lot of mythic stuff about it. Well, I hope you liked this little discussion of ATU 500 and 501. If you have any further thoughts about these two stories and what they say and what lessons they might be teaching, put them down in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about what you got out of these stories. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful evening and take care. Bye now. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed these stories, then give me a like. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I upload a new video of more stories, then toss me a subscribe. It was wonderful to have you here with me. And if you'd like to support the channel a bit more, please check out my profile, main channel there. And I have a Ko-fi, so if you'd like to hear a specific story told, then just check there and you might be able to hear me tell that story just for you. Alright, thank you very much and have a wonderful